Welcome to Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Dr. Steve Wood, and with me today, Bill Kanasky. Bill, how the heck you been?
Good. Summer version here. It's hot. It's hot as hell. Well, you're in Texas, so you're in the same boat as I am.
Yeah.
Here in Florida. But no, it's going good. A little downtime never hurts anybody because we always know what the fall is going to be like. So hopefully, are you taking a vacation? Are you actually getting out?
Yeah, I'm taking a week just to kind of recharge after the floodgates have opened. So yeah, I'm gonna take a week.
I can't tell you the last time I had a week.
Yeah,
I can't.
I'm anticipating it's gonna be 2 days that I was hoping was gonna be a week, but before you know it, I'm answering emails and doing other things.
Yeah, it is tough. The key is to take vacations when everybody else is, if you can try to figure that out. But you know, it's all about timing. Speaking of timing, it's time for I'm going to start. I'm coming right out with the strong rant, and
All
it's
right.
about children. It's about children, Steve. You have kids, right?
Oh yeah, I could rant about this for days, but go ahead.
Okay, but I'm talking so I'm including adult children. Now, as you very well know, my 21-year-old son has moved back from Los Angeles back into the household. So talk about disruption. And he's staying in my guest house, which half of the guest house is my man cave, which is where I'm staying right now, which is where my podcast studio is. So he's right next door here in this bedroom. And this place is an epic disaster. Now you can't see it. I would never turn my camera to show this. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just empty boxes of Chick-fil-A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cans of soda, all half full. And there's just laundry everywhere. This place smells like just ass. This place smells like a men's locker room after a major sporting event. This place stinks. It's disgusting. I feel like I want to gag right now. So kids, I'm saying this, these are male kids. They stink and they're disgusting. I mean, how old's your son now?
He's 11, and sometimes he gets cooped up in his bedroom, and when I go in there, it smells about the same as that too.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's kept all of the stink in the room.
Gosh, it is absolutely disgusting. So I'm gonna try not to gag during it's great to have my son back, but we're gonna have a talk tonight on cleanliness, laundry, a little self hygiene. We're gonna have that talk because it is getting very, very ugly here. Well, it's good to be back on the podcast here. You and I are authoring a new paper, and that's still in the works. But we figured we'd use a couple of episodes to go over this paper because it's actually a really important topic. And we've covered a lot of witness training topics, witness performance topics on this podcast. And but this one we have not. This one we're going really deep into the witness brain on this one. And I think this is going to be a good paper. But we're going to title this paper, I'm bringing it up right now, The 13 Cognitive Distortions that are crippling your witness. Now, what is a cognitive distortion? Irrational thinking patterns. Okay, let's just keep it simple. Irrational thinking patterns. And, witnesses have this, well, I mean, just like any other human being, witnesses are biased. They have irrational thoughts. They have irrational beliefs. And unknowingly, they reinforce these over time. I mean, we all have these. It's a very human thing, but your witnesses are human. And, what our brains are really predisposed to doing, which is really dangerous in life, but particularly, in the context of litigation and witness testimony, is the brain makes these connections between thoughts, ideas, actions, consequences, whether they're really truly connected or not. And that leads to witnesses making a lot of, faulty conclusions, non-helpful connections between things. And it can really screw up your witness's perspective going into a deposition or even more importantly, trial. So let's go over a handful of these, and in subsequent episodes, we'll go through the full list of 13. But the first one we call polarized thinking. Polarized thinking. And this is the type of thinking that occurs, and every attorney's been through this with their witness. The witness has to be Mr. or Mrs. Perfect related to their testimony. And if they're not perfect, they see it as a complete failure. A lot of type A people tend to think this way. You get this a lot with those maybe high level executives, surgeons, right? High level corporate representatives who believe that, if their testimony has any flaws whatsoever, case is over, we're screwed, and then they will be fully responsible. Now, this is a pretty common thing that I've seen with those types of witnesses, and these types of witnesses, and particularly the ones that really don't understand the litigation process. They don't understand that there are shades of gray in testimony, and they can't avoid the extremes. But these are just really perfectionistic witnesses. Steve, how often do you see this, and what are those discussions you have with this witness? Because this is the type of witness where if they don't get an A+, they think the case is over and we're screwed.
Yeah, I think one of the main things I do in that situation is talk to the witness and just say, you're one of many witnesses in this case, right? There's experts, there's other fact witnesses that are going to be presenting, and we just need you not to suck, right? We just need
Don't
you
suck.
Yeah.
Do not suck. Try.
Yeah.
In fact, during the Cubs 2016, Joe Madden came out with the famous phrase, and they still have the T-shirts all over Wrigleyville. Try not to suck today.
It's right. And I mean, and that's really all you need, and at least, to help alleviate some of that pressure, because a lot of times, as you said, these type A personalities are putting all this pressure on themselves. And the problem becomes is if they realize in the middle of the deposition they made a mistake or they didn't answer something perfectly.
Oh yeah.
Then what do they start doing? They start ruminating on it, and before you know it, that's all they're focused on, and then it goes to hell in the deposition because they're too busy focused on the mistake that they made at the very beginning.
Yeah, and then they can't think. They can't process information because they're thinking about their previous answers, and that's a real problem, particularly with a strong personality and people that are really successful, either business wise or, again, I brought up you and I work with a lot of neurosurgeons, cardiothoracic surgeons, transplant surgeons. I mean, these are people that they kind of got to be perfect, right? Or at least close to perfect in their job. And then they bring that into testimony. And so that's why I think the witness training part is so important, to break them down cognitively on that and to correct that irrational pattern. Because many of these people, I mean, particularly, like I have a story that I always tell, where I was working with a surgeon in Indiana, and we're doing our witness training session. We're doing the mock questioning, and he gave this answer that from a litigation standpoint was just perfect. And I said, time out. And we all sat there and went, we applauded the entire legal team. And he looked at us and said, that's it? And I went, yeah, that's it. Like, I don't have to go into this 4-paragraph explanation. No. He's like, really? I go, yeah. And so there, again, it's a very irrational thought, but I think particularly some of these people, they figure the more I talk, the more complicated I make it, the smarter I look. And if I say that perfectly, it's somehow going to be a benefit for the case. But you and I know that that is not the case, is it?
No, it's not. It goes back to kind of, we're talking about cognitive distortions, but also some more psychology when you're talking about the whole idea that length implies strength. So therefore, your long-winded responses must somehow be better than your short, concise responses. But as we all know, that's not true. Sometimes short, concise is much better than long-winded.
It's usually always better. And don't forget, we've talked about cognitive fatigue. You want to wear yourself down as a witness. Yeah, start pivoting. You knew I was going there. Start pivoting every single response and see how your energy works out. Also see how much money you're going to pay at the end of the case.
Exactly.
We're very anti pivoting. It's just the dumbest idea ever. I have no problem saying that too. They can come after me. All right. So that's polarized thinking number 1. Number two, mental filtering. Let's define mental filtering. This is a type of thinking where your witness exclusively focuses on the negatives of the case, otherwise what we'd refer to as bad facts, and really filters out or ignores any of the positive aspects of the case. So these witnesses tend to magnify, that's the key here, they magnify the negative details of the case, and they pretty much refuse to pay attention to any of the positive, aspects of it. It's very, this is very, I see this being very common with people that are being deposed for the first time. They're new to litigation. They're experiencing high levels of, fear, anxiety. They're worried. In every one of these cases we work on, there are plenty of positive facts, but man, they're so focused on the negative. And the problem was with the over focus, it becomes magnified, right? And they don't really, so they think this, hey, this case is nothing but negative when in fact there are some positives. Steve, tell me about your experience with that and some of the things you tell the witnesses, because listen, I mean, we're all human. Hey, I'm guilty of it as well. It's really easy to focus on the negative.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, obviously you need to tell your witnesses what the negatives are, or at least, and they already know them, but sometimes they don't know all of them. But it's important to tell them just for the fact that they get comfortable with them. And then, we always talk about on this about eating the bad facts. But that's one of the things is when they identify them and feel comfortable with them, they can eat them. But, like you said, I think pointing them out, discussing them, and talking about how what on the surface may sound like a bad fact or may sound like something that they're going to want to try to explain away is really not as bad as what they think. And then, like you said, pointing out to the fact that all the different things that plaintiff's alleging, you can say, hey, we have experts that are going to back up all these things to show your care or your actions in this situation were appropriate. So I think, like you said, it's important to identify them, but it's definitely important to kind of put them in context.
Yeah, and all the solutions, the solutions to all 13 of these irrational thinking patterns is the same. And boy, there's a ton of science behind this in clinical psychology. And that solution is called cognitive reframing, meaning the witness needs to perceive reality in a much more accurate way. They need to reframe their thoughts into accuracy, reality versus this negative thinking pattern. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. It takes a lot of repetition, and it usually always takes coaching. It always takes coaching, because if you don't have anybody to call you, and again, this is either personally or within the witness prep setting, if you don't have a third party to call out your negative distortions, right? your cognitive distort, you're never going to know, right? You're not even aware of it. And so that's why I think one of our main values in that witness prep is to identify those things, help the witness reframe those things, and then reinforce that reframing. The other thing I see with this, Steve, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is I notice, and I understand why it leads to problems. And so it's a lack of awareness where defense counsel, I think, tends to inadvertently maybe overemphasize the negative facts of the case, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of, can kind of push the witness towards that negativity, and really ignore the positive. Have you seen defense counsel almost exclusively focus on the bad facts, and then the good stuff just doesn't get enough attention?
Yeah, I think sometimes, but I think, some of the attorneys we work with often have got a sense of kind of understanding of not doing that. So I think sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I think sometimes it also helps for us, like you said, when we come in and kind of offer up and try to focus on some of the positive things. I think it kind of makes them feel more comfortable to be able to focus on the positive things as well. So, it can be a mixed bag as far as doing that. But I've definitely seen it, and like you said, to your point, it doesn't help your witnesses to get over it or stop ruminating on it.
Yeah, and so again, it takes this, and again, cognitive reframing is it's a very difficult type of training that we do with witnesses. And I think attorneys would deeply struggle with it if they try to do it by themselves. It's because a lot of these negative thought patterns, Steve, they've developed over years, that sometimes decades. You know people in your life that always see something in a negative way. Well, they've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
They've been doing that for a reason. Then they get into litigation. Well, it's a cognitive pattern. They're wired to do that. And so again, much of our job is to rewire that witness brain, and that is not easy, and it takes time.
I think one other
All
thing I want
right.
to talk.
Good.
One other thing I did want to mention when you're talking about that kind of negative feeling, I think it's a point we've talked about before, and you and I have talked about it, about how witnesses look at the attorneys as far as everything they've ever had engagement with the attorneys has been negative, 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 talking about the case, talking about the bad facts, talking about all the deposition that's coming up. So they're already having that negative bent as well. So I think that's another thing that you were talking about, attorneys inadvertently helping with that negative opinion, because they're not trying to, they're trying to help the client. The problem is the client sees them as, oh God, every time this guy calls me, something bad's about to happen.
Well, that's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth, man. Yeah, it's so defense counsel, this, when we put this together in a paper, and then Steve and I will put this together into a CLE program, I think this is going to be really helpful to train defense counsel, because they're going to have to learn how to identify these distorted thinking patterns, and then try to learn how to help with them. But that's why we're here. Okay, so we got 2 down. We're not doing all 13 today. We'll just go over 3 or 4. Number 3, cognitive distortion by the witness, overgeneralization. Overgeneralization. So this is the type of thinking that happens when the witness really focuses on a single negative event from the past and makes an extreme conclusion that all other events in the future will be negative. So in litigation, this really happens in 2 circumstances. Number 1, this is when the witness's deposition is poor. Okay, so they've already been deposed, and they shit the bed, and they will automatically assume that the trial testimony is also going to suck. That's very, very common. I see a lot of witnesses come into trial preparation really, really pissed, because they know they bombed their deposition. They don't feel they were prepared adequately. And now they're thinking, well, shit, now I'm going to be in front of a jury, now I'm going to get destroyed. And they just assume they're going to get waxed in front of the jury. And so that's kind of one of the areas that this comes up when you get that poor deposition. And then they think it's going to, they're going to do the exact same, if not worse, at trial. And then secondly, this happens a lot too, when the witness has testified in a previous case, whether it be deposition or trial, and there was an adverse outcome. So for example, a witness has been through the litigation experience, they have been deposed, they went to trial, they lost, right? And now they have a new case. That is really, really difficult to get over. It creates very, very powerful cognitive distortions. I have worked with a number of witnesses that have had bad experiences in testimony prior to the current, case. And man, it is sometimes almost impossible to get them from not, thinking about that past event. And then the key here is they're making this automatic and extreme conclusion, this assumption that, well, it went shitty before, so it's going to be shitty on this one too. Steve, how often do you see that one?
I see it, and I'm actually, I've currently been dealing with it, and recently. So, bad, like you said, bad deposition testimony, and then you need to try to fix it for trial. And I think one of the things that resonated when you were talking about it was the whole idea of, I wasn't prepared for my deposition, and I wish I would have had that for my deposition. And I think one of the big things I just do in that situation is say, can't go back and change the past. We just need to make sure we identify kind of the mistakes that were made, so that we can move forward. But I always tend to not necessarily harp on all of the bad things, and more or less just try to get them prepared. And I think one of the things I think is beneficial in that is when you point out kind of the things not to do as a witness. A lot of times the witnesses are smart enough to go, "Oh, I did that in my deposition," and they know,
Yeah.
in all, they can identify it without you having to say, "Look, here's all the different times that you made mistakes." And that's what I've found to help kind of alleviate some of that stress and concern. But it's definitely an issue that we deal with all the time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so the cognitive reframing here is to really challenge the witness to say, okay, well, you know, what evidence do you have that the last case is going to end up the same as this? And they're not going to be able to come up with anything. It's just, it's an assumption. You're going to identify the assumption, and then encourage them to work hard and prepare, and to, they need to understand that hard work, preparation, and better focus is going to lead to better outcomes, period. Now, Steve, you having a son who's highly competitive in athletics, same with my son. This is a huge sports psychology issue. I mean, I know you're not ready for this question, but there's got to be a time when your kid, right, either, and I know your kid's a pitcher, either he blew a save or gave up a home run, but then he's got to play 4 days later, right? I mean, how do you get into your kid's head to say you can't let the last game, get into your head this game, because it's a different game, right?
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is I always understand is it's easier said than done, right? I just tell
Yes.
him, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Look at all the good things you did." And he's like, "Yeah, that's great, but all I can think about is the walk that I had or the home run that I gave up or whatever." So I think all of this is to say too that you and I think understand. We say that you should be able to do these things. We say that the witnesses should be able to just brush it off and move on, and it's easier said than done. I think that goes back to why you say hard work, preparation, and focus are needed in order to get yourself to that situation. So I think with my son and what I do with witnesses is, you just have to keep encouraging them because they're not going to get it the first time. And for me to tell them, just let it go, you got to play in 4 days, is not going to work. But after a while of having that conversation, eventually it starts to sink in, and eventually it helps him to understand, okay, he's right. I keep hearing this over and over again, and he's right that I do let it go, and things are good when I let it go. So, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the more, all of these things that we're talking about on this list are very powerful. This is one of the most powerful because it's so applicable to everyday life, because you have this, what I call the here we go again phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's completely illogical thinking, right? I mean, the fact that, okay, you're at home, right? And you're walking through your kitchen and, your son spilled something on the floor and didn't clean it up. And you slip and you bust your ass and you're like, God, that hurt. Right. And then an hour later, you're driving to work and you get a speeding ticket. Well, what is your brain doing? Your brain is connecting those two events like, well, God, this is a really shitty day.
Yeah.
God, I must have pissed the universe off, or maybe God is mad at me today or something. And your brain starts doing this really, really weird things. Happens in, oh God, when I'm watching sports, it's like oh my God, here we go again. Here we go again. But the fact of the matter is, none of those factors are related at all.
No.
Our brain, but that's how the brain's wired. The brain's hired to try to make sense of things. And that's one of the main flaws of the brains, because not everything is going to be able to make sense. And a lot of these factors are completely unrelated. So yeah, past events, past performance is a real difficult factor with these witnesses. So if you get a witness that's that negative litigation experience, ready for this, Steve? Know what this has come up a lot. You're gonna die when you hear this. I've had several witnesses that have never been through a lawsuit related to their profession. The only experience they've had with litigation was a divorce, and they were deposed as part of their divorce. Oh my God. You talk about the worst possible situation. So you have this witness coming in. Now they're going to be deposed for the current case, which has to do with their job. And the only experience they've had is getting grilled by a divorce attorney. Yeah. So I've had to talk a few people off the ledge with that one,
Can imagine.
and yeah, because I mean, I don't think divorce litigation has anything to do with civil litigation, like that, like what we face. So, yeah. So, So folks, defense attorneys, talk to your witnesses about their previous experiences with testimony, with litigation. See how they feel. One of the things we've always tried to educate our audience on is talk to your witnesses about their feelings. How do they feel about certain things? And so many attorneys skip that because either they're unaware of how important it is, or it's just not their thing. They're uncomfortable with it. And yeah, it's a little bit of armchair psychology, but you will find a lot out about your witnesses' vulnerabilities by assessing their feelings, and getting them talking, getting them to open up to you. It's really, really important. And like a friendship, or like a marriage, or like a work relationship, a a client and an attorney, that attorney client relationship is a relationship. It never gets called that, right? It never gets called a relationship. It is a relationship. And but it gets handled so business like sometimes. I think that many of the attorneys miss things more emotionally with their witnesses, and then it blows up in their face down the road. So attorneys, talk to your, I think that's a whole nother podcast, Steve.
Yeah, that's definitely
attorney. Yeah, write that down. We're always talking about attorney-client privilege. Well, how about the attorney-client relationship? Really? Because so we would be like marriage therapists for the attorney-client so we're like attorney-client therapists in a way, right? Gotta like make these two parties get along well. All right, let's finish up with one more. And this is a common one. Everybody knows about this one. Number 4, cognitive distortion, jumping to conclusions. This is less sophisticated, happens all the time. But again, this is the type of thinking when your witness is just convinced that they or the company is just screwed and believe there's no chance whatsoever at obtaining a favorable trial verdict or a favorable settlement. These witnesses are so convinced that the case is a complete loser, they often evade or downplay witness preparation because they feel it's a waste of time. We're we're going to get tagged. Why? We obviously made mistakes here. Steve, I see this a lot in cases where there's a lot of bad facts. Oftentimes these are the types of cases where there's going to be maybe admitted liability. And then the witnesses don't understand mitigation. And so I think a lot of these witnesses, rather than putting in the time or effort into, witness prep, witness training, trial prep, what have you, document review, meetings with attorneys, they just kind of, they think this case is a loser. Why am I wasting it? And they just don't put their full effort in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've seen that. And I think one of the other things I've seen similar along those lines are, the comments of, really, this litigation's still going on? Like, you guys haven't settled it yet? How come you can't just settle this case? Let's just settle. And,
happens all the time.
Yeah. Just settle it.
Just settle it. It's like, well, we're trying. If you would help us settle it by helping.
Yeah, I think that goes back to understanding kind of how the witness performance can help position settlement negotiations. So if you want it settled, like you said, focus, take it seriously, do document review, and use the witness training sessions as a time to help position the case, and then you might be in a better position to settle it. So I definitely have one of those things that we see often out of witnesses.
Yeah, I got insurance. Just settle it. Well, from the insurance standpoint, it's not so easy. So those are 4 of the 13. Steve will do this again next week and cover 3 or 4 more. But I think this is a very, very interesting topic. And we've covered a lot of deep psychological topics regarding witness training. I think this is one of the deeper ones which really deserves a lot of attention. And you and I will keep working on the paper and get that published, turn it into a CLE. and then start giving that at seminars and law firms and things like that. But I think this was a good productive episode.
Yes, I agree. So as Bill said, we'll be back with another episode to add a few more cognitive distortions, have another conversation about how to approach those. And, we'll hopefully use that to increase the chances of witnesses performing good at both deposition and at trial. So we'll look forward to another episode of Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. Take care.
Sit.